everyone, and welcome to the next video tutorial in the paint along series. So for this one we're going to be looking at painting some iron. So basically what we're targeting is the shoulder pad. So we're painting this model here, shoulder pad, and his weapon, the sword, painted in the same fashion that I've already painted this model. So to begin with, we're going to base coat the areas that we're painting for the iron in Iron Warriors. It's a nice dark metallic. That'll be a good base for what we're working with. So we're starting quite dark and working our way up. Being kind of quite crude armor and weaponry, we're going for that iron sort of look. We don't want it to be too clean and neat and bright, and that's part of the reason why we've started with such a dark metal. So we're just working that over as a base coat over all those surfaces. There will be other small details that you can add this to, buckles and other little chains and things like that over some of the models, but for now we're just targeting these areas. It might be easier to go back and do those metallic areas after you've, for instance, after you've painted the leather straps, which could get a bit messy, and then being finer details, it would be easy to do those afterwards over the top. But yeah, for now, for the purposes of the tutorial, we're just going to work on his weapon and his shoulder pad. They're nice areas to show you what we're working on. Alright, so now I've got a nice clean coat of that Iron Warriors over all of the metallic parts. So now I'm going to apply a wash. So what I'm using is an equal parts mix of Black Templar and Nuln oil, and I've also added some water, roughly the same amount as the paints. And using a big brush, I'm just going to apply that over the whole surface. And so this is going to darken things up even more. And just create some nice transitions in some of the surfaces. So that it helps you create a bit of contrast in the surface. So it should pull nicely in the recesses, and it is going to darken some of the flatter surfaces as well, just to give us an even darker metallic to work over. So yeah, it's simple as that for that step. And we're going to wait for that to dry, of course, and then move on to the next. Alright, so once that has dried, it's time to start moving on to the next step, which is to apply some highlights. So for this we're going to go with a stippling technique actually, which will help just to give it more of that weathered and crude sort of look. So what we're working with is Iron Breaker, and I've actually got an older brush with me, which has lost most of its fine tip. And that's what I want to work with for this technique. If I have a nice fine point, it's not going to get the desired effect that I want. If you're wanting to stipple, it's best to use an older brush. So what we're doing is we're loading up a bit of paint on the brush. And you can actually just wipe a little bit of the excess off. We don't want to get too much paint on the surface when we're applying it. And what I'm going to do is, just to show it off, is to start applying it to the tip. Maybe got rid of a little bit too much. So, because the end hasn't got that fine point and it's kind of, sort of got that frayed kind of effect happening, it's easy to create those multiple fine dots, which is perfect for the effect that we're looking for. So the approach to this is to try and keep some contrast in the surface of the blade. And so how we're doing that is I'm leaving this area up here untouched. I'm gonna look at this part here to show you an example. And I'm going to start highlighting down here. So when you're stippling, basically you want to create tighter dots to create a stronger highlight or shadow, depending on what you're doing. And then as you space them out, as you can see I'm doing there, it becomes a kind of a softer effect. So what you're getting is a stronger highlight down here because you're kind of building it up more and then bringing out and softening it out there. So it's quite an easy technique to get quite a crude sort of transition, but it's quite effective for what we're doing for this particular surface. So again, nice and tight dots down there. Drawing it out. If your dots start to get a bit too big and it looks like you're just blopping on big dots of paint, then that's when you can wipe a bit off to get them a bit finer. Just continuing along, I'm going to maybe target this area, have a strong highlight in the middle, and then just bring it out a bit. To the top and down underneath. Getting metallics to look nice is all about creating contrast. And so because I've got quite a nice dark area here, I want to maybe build up a highlight here to kind of accentuate that a bit. Just highlighting the edge of the blade as well, bringing some of that into there. It's important to highlight the edges because it gives it that sharpness to it. And of course, the actual sharp edge of the blade as well is important to work on. So using the edge of the brush, kind of quite quickly apply those highlights. All right, and then if you've got a finer brush handy, you don't have to do this. I think it just helps to kind of bring out these kind of details in the blade, but I'm just kind of building up the highlight on those kind of ridges just to show the segments of the blade, where the edges are. Bring it all the way along there. Get a bit more of the form of the blade showing. So yeah, so it gives a nice, beaten kind of look. It's not nice and smooth and shiny, which is, not what you'd expect for a barbarian sort of fighter anyway. And then you can apply the same principle to the shoulder pad. And this is quite easy. It's kind of just applying it in the obvious areas where the light's going to hit most. On that main outer part there. And then bringing it maybe on the edges as well. And again, helps to just give it that nice beaten and worn and weathered kind of look. Because I mean, the sculpting of these surfaces already has that kind of dented sort of look to it, what you'd expect for a crude iron armour. So there you go. Quite simple. Let's move on to the next step now. Alright, so for this next step is just to apply some stronger highlights. So what I'm using for this is actually Vallejo Model Air Metallic Chrome, which is a really, really nice paint. It's a very nice, strong highlight. And you can use it straight from the bottle. It's a perfect dilution for using with a paintbrush. And basically what I'm just doing with that is I'm going over where I've already applied those fine highlights with the finer brush. Just kind of accentuating those a little bit. And the edges, we want to make the edge of the blade look a bit sharper, obviously, than the rest of the weapon. So just applying it right on those edges will help to do that. Just gives it a nice, strong highlight. And might apply that a bit to the shoulder pad as well. Just kind of being quite selective with it. You don't want to go too overboard with this, because then we kind of start going into the realm of the cleaner sort of look, or too bright or whatever. We want to try to avoid that. But yeah, just adds a little bit of an extra detail, adds a little bit more of a sheen to it, but it gives it that kind of freshly weathered, that kind of bare metal underneath showing through sort of appearance, which is quite nice. Just applying it to this side as well. You might not be able to see it that well on camera, but it does make a difference. And you can see I'm kind of being rough with the highlights right on the edge, instead of going, just a nice clean line, and it helps to give it a bit more of a weathering kind of look. So yeah, there we go for that stage. Just making those highlights a bit stronger. Alright, so for the next step, I want to start applying a rusted effect. So what I'm starting with is Rhinox hide, and I've diluted that to kind of a heavy glaze sort of consistency. So it's 1 part paint to 2 parts water. And then with that, we're kind of just choosing some areas that we're just going to kind of apply as sort of a heavy sort of wash feel. You can kind of just dot it across the blade a little bit. Don't go too over the top. On the shoulder pad is definitely a nice place to apply it. So around the rivets, in the kind of dents and chips and things is a good area to go with. And then just kind of being selective across the surface. And alright, now I'm just going to wait for that to dry. Alright, so that's dry. And then the next step is very much the same, except we're using Mournfang Brown and diluted in the same way. 1 part paint to 2 parts water. Basically, we're just going to apply that over the areas we've already done, but we want some of the Rhinox hide to show through. So we're kind of getting a little bit of a transition happening, a bit of a blend between the two colours. And then Mournfang Brown really starts to give it more of a rust, that oxidized kind of look. Apply over these bits as well. We wait for that to dry. Alright, and then the final step is to use Scrag Brown in the same way, diluted the same, and again applying it over the top, allowing some of the previous colour to show through. And this gives it that really, very much that rusted look, that orange. And there you have it. You just apply that over all of it, and then we wait for that to dry, and then you've got your rusted look. Alright, there we have it. So that's how I would go about painting a weathered and crude armor with a bit of a rust effect happening on it. Yeah, so I hope you found this tutorial helpful as the next step in the paint along, and I hope you can put it to good use on these models. But yeah, in future on whatever kind of projects you want to work on, it would be really good for other chaos warriors and things like that, or even for some sort of Nurgle models would be quite good. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for your continued support.